is episode 4 of the Leadership Pulse with me, Maureen Ramsamy, CEO of Franklin Covey South Africa. Today, we are privileged to feature one of South Africa's most iconic voices in leadership, transformation, and purpose-driven change. Professor Bonang Mohale. His mantra, people first, the planet, then profits. Prof Mohale is more than a business leader. He's a living symbol of what it means to lead with integrity and uplift others as you climb. As Chancellor of the University of Free State and the Chairman of the Bidvest Group, his visionary leadership has redefined industries, touched countless lives, and shaped the future of South Africa. He's a sought-after thought leader, the best-selling author of Lift As You Rise, and his more recent publication, Behold the Turtle, a relentless advocate for ethical leadership and social justice. From the boardrooms of Shell South Africa to the highest echelons of influence, Professor Mohale has earned global recognition for his ability to turn challenges into opportunities and inspire others to believe in the power of collective greatness. Listen as Bonang shares leadership lessons using our African proverbs, principle-centered leadership, and life lessons from the animal kingdom. He is famously known for saying, "How can you speak of the sea to a frog that has never left its pond?" Liken this to, how can a young person aspire to be a good leader if they have never seen good leadership in practice? This is not just a conversation. It's a masterclass in leadership, resilience, and the pursuit of meaningful impact. Join me in my conversation.
For all the listeners and the people that are watching us, this is an amazing day to have this icon, a South African icon, in the room with us in our Leadership Pulse. And you know, when we talk about Leadership Pulse, as you know from all of our previous conversations, it is about the heartbeat of what is going on the leadership platform here in South Africa and abroad and inside of corporate South Africa. So, Prof Bonang, welcome and thank you for the abundance of your time. You know, as I was preparing for our time together, I couldn't but go to the space of some of the conversations you've started about where did you come from? What is your backstory? So I wonder whether we can get started there. I mean, nobody just arrives as the chairperson of a big organization such as this one that we sit inside by accident, right? So tell us a little bit about that story. And as we unfold this discussion, there'll be a number of avenues we will go through, but let's just start there.
Let me start first by saying thank you for having me, Melanie. I'm passionate about many things, and I'm truly blessed with some of the most amazing opportunities. But something that I love more than others, one is leadership. When you say leadership, of course you got me. I'll always come because it gives me an opportunity to learn. But number two, because I know you for so many years, and I love the way your mind works, but I love the work that you do. So when you combine those two, you had no choice but to have me.
Oh,
and thank you. So maybe to start about who is Bonang Mohale. I don't know, because there's a thing that you are really coming onto your own through the eyes of others. It's like falling in love. It's the feedback you get from your significant other that determines whether you're on the right course or not. In fact, the way we both cause and force ourselves to grow is to actively seek this feedback. Because otherwise you think you're doing okay. I think about it as pretty much like running on your own around the stadium. You'll never forget how magnificent and wonderful and superb you are until you are in a race with others. And then you become number one from the back. Then you realize that you are not really doing much. So the people who engage, interact, and interface with me use 3 words to describe me. First, they say I'm a change agent. 2, they say I'm a social justice activist. Lastly, they say I'm a defender of democracy. All 3 loaded things. I didn't set out to be that. I'm a township boy. I grew up in the township. I just wanted to be myself. But let me just end by saying, now that they've used those 3, I look back and say, actually, they are not too foreign to me, because being precedes doing.
Nice. Yeah. I love the fact that you've started off saying that you're really passionate about leadership. You know, in all of these spaces that I've seen you interact and heard some of the stories that you tell, the idea of being a model citizen as far as leadership is concerned really resonates with me. As I've read some of your works as well, there's other captains of industry that talk about you as a visionary leader. But that doesn't come from, from nowhere. There must have been some sort of guiding thought that as you looked around, you thought something needs to give, and you brought yourself into that. Talk to me a little bit about some of those moments of epiphany that when you've landed, it's like, okay, this is what I need to do. And it speaks back to social justice. It speaks back to all of these things that I can really demonstrate beyond just being, but doing.
So first, it's an acknowledgement that the world is in a spot of bother. We're not where we want to be. Hence the need for social justice. Social justice talks about fairness and equity. And it says it's because that is lacking in the world. I've fallen in love with leadership because when philosophers' job is to interpret the world in various forms, leadership sets out to change it, and change it for the better. So it's not leadership in and of itself. It's about saying, if wealth is the inevitable outcome of both hard work and enterprise, then every woman in Africa should be a dollar billionaire. Leadership begs the question, 30 years into democracy, isn't it amazing that poverty still has primarily a black and feminine face? It talks to the ones that feel on the fringes, those that are othered, those that are subjugated and excluded, to say, actually, there's nothing wrong with you. Because poverty of black people and women in South Africa is not a personal thing. It's not you, it's not me. It's both systemic and systematic. So it's when we address the system that makes it impossible for people to reach their potential. Not even their fullest potential, just their potential. That's when we're doing our job. Let me just end by saying, but it's biblical, isn't it? Not in Christianity point of view, but in spirituality point of view. Because there is Christianity, then there's religion, then there's spirituality. Spirituality is about, why am I here? Surely I must have been brought here for a purpose. Because if we accept that, then we'll say, oh, Khalil Gibral was correct when he said those that are helping others are completing God's work. It says we cannot be our best selves when we are only obsessed with ourselves. That doing good is good for everybody. If you are a business, you can't continue to be an island of prosperity in a sea of poverty, because business thrives when humanity is doing well. Otherwise, who's going to buy your goods and services? Actually, there's a problem when you produce cars, goods, and services, and your own employees can't afford it. In fact, when businesses create jobs, it's not an act of charity. You're not doing it out of the goodness of your heart. You are creating the markets of the future. So there's an enlightened self-interest. Because if you established that business in a desert, you'll be talking to yourself. Therefore, if you establish business within thriving humanity, you'll make money until it comes out of your ears. The Japanese say, before you become a millionaire, make somebody else a millionaire. It sounds almost counterintuitive, but that's what makes us truly human. Because I've never met one successful person that has ever reached there on their own. All of us get a lot of help. All of us get our path smoothed out for us. All of us walk into establishments like this and we think, oh, I'm so brilliant, I made it on my own. We don't know that 30 years before we came, there were some people who were waging wars about transformation, about broad-based black economic empowerment, about the inclusion, about equity, about diversity. Because they fought those wars, companies ultimately landed the message and they went out seeking for somebody that looks like you. Nothing happens on its own. Everything happens for a reason. All of us are interconnected. In fact, we are no more than 5 people away from getting help. That getting help is the essence of humanity.
You know, everything that you have said is so connected with each other. This whole idea of existentialism and, you know, me being fully human because I engage with other humans, that's what makes me human. But where I want to go as far as what you've shared is this: your starting block was you're out in the field, you're running by yourself, you don't realize how fabulously great you can be unless you have somebody else that can give you that feedback. And leadership is about that. You know, what you've said is so profound, because I see leadership's role to give and receive feedback, because feedback is a gift. And when people don't recognize that feedback is a gift and they see it as a criticism and they see it as, you know, as something negative, then you cannot appreciate that feedback from whence it comes, and therefore the opportunity to grow is not there. Really interesting that you say that about the feedback piece. I was reading something a few weeks ago, Adam Grant's Hidden Potential, and he talks about this notion of how do we seek information, or how do we acquire information? What is the mindset? Do we reach out for information reactively, in other words, just what comes in our peripheral? Or are we proactive? And if we are proactive, do we go out with a growth mindset, or it is to further feed my ego? And what I am finding with conversations I'm having and trying to secure conversations with influential people in industry is that they really are ego-driven, hanging on to a title of, well, I am the CEO, or I am the, you know, that title divorces them from their role of looking at, from an existential perspective, how do I expand? When I ask myself, where do I come from? Why am I here? What is my purpose? How do I make those around me bigger and more?
Sure. I think you've hit the nail on the head. And you've raised so many layers of this onion. So let me latch on to seeking feedback. Why do we seek feedback? I think it stems from the fact that we are imperfect, not by accident, but by design. And it says we are social animals in bone and marrow. And it says we were never meant to be alone. So all of those three things put together says even this thing called economics is how we can live together well. That's the definition of economics. Not highfalutin definitions. It's about going back to basics. It says, because there's a system of how we engage, interact, and interface, some of us must be workers at some point in time. Some of us must be leaders at some point in time. But leadership presupposes followership. Therefore, I think the real gift of leadership is knowing when to lead, but most importantly, knowing when to be led. Because you can't be born a leader always, all the time. It's about saying, how do I subject myself to be led from time to time? A simple example is that you work very hard, you get acknowledged, you are called chairman of the Bidvest Group Limited. Funny enough, it's only when you have the title that you are open to learning more from others, including the people who are doing janitorial services. Because nature is a wonderful metaphor for business. It also says leadership has nothing to do with what is on your business card, as you alluded to, nor the corner office. It's a feeling. That's what it, and yet in business we are told not to feel. We must be rational, we must be logical, we must be tough. When you show your heart on the people, but your head on the figures, sometimes you're referred to as a weak leader. No, you don't know how to be tough on people. But real leadership says, can I allow you to be yourself in my authentic self? Because it's only when what you think, say, and do are in perfect alignment that you have inner peace. Because leadership is actually a privilege to improve the quality of lives of the majority of our people, not an opportunity to enrich self. And you can look at it in all manifestations called life. Here's the one that I really love. It says you have to love your people to lead them. Because you're not leading them to doom and gloom, you're leading them to nirvana. You lead them so that they get better today compared to yesterday, to leave room for them to get better tomorrow compared to today. Therefore, if you have to love your people to lead them, it means you are always acting in the best interest of your people. That's why we say love is seeing yourself in another. I can't see myself in you and I wish you harm. I wish you only the best because I see myself in you. That's the definition of Ubuntu. I am because you are. So that it takes us to a higher level, which says we are because you are. The ultimate is for us to say, how do we tessellate like a jigsaw puzzle within a broader scheme of things? Because on my own, I would perish and die. But if there's two of us, there's a chance that we can conquer. Scientists would look very funnily at a monkey that holds all the bananas to itself when the entire congress of monkeys is starving, because the very survival of that monkey is in the well-being of the congress, the troop of monkeys. You need one to go up the tree to say, I can see the lioness coming. We are in danger. Collect the little ones so that we go to safety. You need the one at the bottom to look and say, hey, Miss Python is coming here. Our kids are not safe. It's how the others see, the others listen, the others feel, that the entire survival of the troop is there. But yet as human beings, we miss this. Those that hoard only to themselves, we put them on the cover of Fortune magazine. Melody, let me conclude by saying leadership is a huge calling. Because leadership says, I'm not happy with just being okay on my own. Leadership says, I'm going to go out, invest time, energy, and effort to make sure that my family is okay. My society is okay. My community is okay. If we get those, ultimately, the world will be okay.
And Bonang, you know, as you were talking, I could not but reflect on all of these words that we kind of having a general conversation, but speaks back to the principle-centeredness of leadership. Because when we talk about what is leadership, and we're saying it's not the title on your business card, and knowing, in your words, when to lead and when to follow, is about recognizing that leadership is a choice. It's not a position. That leadership is about communicating to people their worth so that they can come to see it in themselves, communicating their worth and potential so that they are inspired to see it in themselves, in Stephen Covey's words. You talk about congruency of action, thought, speaking, and it goes back to the idea that people don't follow strategy, they don't follow great ideas, they follow credible leaders. And you know, that congruency that you talk about of integrity is anchored in all of the Covey work. And I mean, you know Covey work for years and years and years. And what has kept us, you know, for more than 40 years at the center, you don't earn the reputation of being the most trusted leadership development company in the world by accident, right? Developed more than 30 million leaders across the globe. But everything that you have said, I can see the alignment with the principled and centered natureness of leading with principles. When you think about our foundational program that I believe everybody needs to have at their heart center, the 7 habits is anchored on that maturity continuum, right? Dependence is, well, you do everything for me. It's a you paradigm. You are responsible for where I find myself now. You know, it's your fault. Or you move up that maturity continuum and it's independence, which is necessary. It gets us to the door, but it's insufficient. Necessary but insufficient in an interdependent world. Because independent is a I mindset. It's going back to what will get me on the cover of the magazine. Whilst the highest level of that maturity continuum is interdependence. It's a we mindset. I value all the strengths that you have as you value what I bring. You know, when we think about the current discourse around equity, diversity, and really bringing multiple thoughts into one room, we can see how organizations that have diversity at their table outperform organizations that have echo chambers. All right, so it really speaks back to that level of understanding. What is it, what will it take for me as a leader to know when to suspend judgment, when to speak up and when not to, when to play big, when to play small. And these are some of the things that I suppose in your years, you've had multiple layers of experience. Talk to me about how do you get it right? How have you managed to build people around you that could, without a shadow of a doubt, say, this is the person that has helped me come up. There's a quote that I want to bring in, it's from your book. And you say, people are not looking for a handout, they're looking for a hand up. Talk to me about that.
So I think the essence of leadership and this seeking for a higher self is precisely the reason why leadership matters. It matters because it wouldn't be terribly useful when we think that because I'm a leader, I must produce many followers, because then you're not growing. There's an African adage that says, the product of the amarula tree is not the amarula fruit, but another amarula tree. Therefore, our job as leaders is to produce other leaders. Because you will never have diversity when you are only the leader out of 20 people for 20 years. Yeah. When are you going to give yourself an opportunity to be led? When are you going to give yourself an opportunity to open yourself to different inputs and perspectives so that you get better today compared to yesterday? Therefore, this search for the next level and for the next level is precisely at the core of leadership, because it's the one that says the world will be a much better place if every single solitary one in that room think of themselves, are liberated to be leaders in their own rights. Because in bad organizations, like in some governments everywhere else in the world, nobody holds anybody finally accountable. People do as they wish. There are no systems, no process. There is no order. Therefore, we don't know that we are all facing in the same direction. But in good companies, people think, oh, no, that's the job of the CEO. So when they see somebody do something wrong, they look at the CEO and, come down on him or her like a ton of bricks. But what we are seeking for is healthy organizations where every single solitary one of the members of that organization feels sufficiently liberated, not empowered, because it's already sitting within them to hold each other and one another finally accountable. To an extent where you as the group CEO can also be challenged. Not because you are not loved, challenged so that you grow. Challenged so that people look at you and say, but last week you told us 1, 2, 3 is important, but boss, this week it looks like you have forgotten. Because if my leadership can be challenged, that makes me a different type of leader. And all we want is for our people to challenge our leadership so that we're not suspicious of leadership. That's why we seek 360-degree feedback. It's when we say, can I go home and raise my children so that at some stage they themselves become adults? And when they become adults, I look at them and learn from them so that maybe in my old age, they can be better able to look after myself. So at that point, we call it financial security and independence. Imagine if you had financial and security in an organization where people are not fearful that they will get fired, but they feel free to speak their mind, that they bring themselves to the workplace, that we didn't hire them only for their hands, but for their ability to think. Because learning is experience. Otherwise, it's just information. You must give them an opportunity to experience, especially because we learn more from those things that we don't get right the first time than from those that we do. So it means creating space and opportunity for them to put a foot wrong, because that's how they learn, that you seek out those faults, because remember, that's how we are designed, so that people don't fear putting the food wrong. Let me just end by saying, leadership comes on its own when you are the reason why people feel noticed, seen, and heard. But even more powerful, imagine you are the reason why they feel supported, loved, and respected. Because our people don't care how much we know. They just want to know that we care about them, that they are the center, the front of the existence of this organization. Because what is a company? It can't be the products and services we sell. Those change. It can't be the bricks and mortar. We move head offices. The company is the people. Because a company that is poor on people is a dead company.
That really aligns exactly to where I want our conversation to go next, because it speaks to, you'd always hear me saying in all of my podcasts that organizations is not the building. The building cannot execute on a strategy. You need people to execute on your strategy. But with that in itself, as a leader of others, you need to empower them. When we talk about leadership, we talk about it as, what sets a good leader from a great leader. And that would be how they think, what they do, the actions they think, and the actions they make, and the results that they get. You can't be a leader and not be responsible for results, right? Those are 4 things. But as we say that, where I want to go to in terms of what you have shared is, how do we get people to bring all of themselves, recognizing that people walk into our organizations, warts and all. How do we get all of them? How do we get people to volunteer their finest efforts towards the highest priority of the organization? Because here is the reality. The truth is that you will never be able to pay people enough for them to volunteer that spirit. You can pay them for their hands. That's physical. It's the thing that's going to pay the bills. It's the thing that's going to pay for the car and for the house. How do you buy this? The heart center, the mind. And part of that is, how do I lead? And I want to hand back to you with sharing an African proverb that talks about, it's okay for me to plant a tree today knowing I will not be around to enjoy the shade. And that's what leadership development is about. It's about knowing that next to me, I have 2 wingmen. That when I step back, 2 people can step forward. And what I'm finding with all of our research across the globe is that many organizations do not have enough ready now leaders. The number one problem inside of organizations is there's not enough ready now leaders. So there is a leadership gap, a challenge. Why do you think that is so in our environments, at a corporate level, at a country level?
Sure. I like what you say, because you see, engineers don't design bridges to stand forever. They design bridges so that they should not fall. Therefore, because you as a leader, you know that you are not going to live forever, it's your job to start planting the leaders that will come besides you, not just after you. You will know that you are succeeding when every single solitary one in the organization feel that I'm the CEO of this company. Because now you are graduating from having one CEO to having 3,720 CEOs. And we call it a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
This is as much my company as it belongs to the CEO, to the CFO, as it belongs to labor, as it belongs to the shareholders. I feel personally and finally accountable. We call it as an acronym DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. But the way I think about it is, surely diversity is when I feel invited to the party. I'm not left outside. I'm not excluded. There are no groups that make decisions over the braai, over the weekend in RTB Sport Dam without me. I just feel invited. But inclusion is being allowed and being invited to a dance. So I'm not sitting as a spectator when other people are making the decisions. I am part of the protagonists. I am acting it out. Belonging is when I'm allowed to bring my own music and play it, so that I also feel like this is my home. Because how many people get subjected to how this is how things are done here? And yet at home, you do things very differently. If this is your company and you feel needed and wanted without any fear of reprisals, you feel free to speak your mind. If you eat with your hands at home, you will not feel awkward here in a formal dinner when you take the piece of rib with your hands and you eat with your hands. Because this is as much your company as it belongs to everybody else's. We're not all trying to follow one mode defined by somebody else as this is the only right way, that there are many right ways. And we lead and manage differently. But we are enriched when we take the best from all. That's why we talk about diversity, about inclusion, about equity, that I don't feel like I'm the B team. I actually feel consulted, because sometimes when I make a suggestion, I see it being implemented. I look at the vision statement, I look at our reason for existence and say, those are my words. That's what came out of me. But I think the reason why leadership is so absolutely important is so that all of us emerge the other end and look around and say, we are all better for it. That nobody is left behind. That it is our job to do everything in our power to make sure that everybody is brought on board. And lastly, you spoke about figures. My grandmother says, isn't it amazing that those people that chase money hardly ever have any, but those that follow their passion make money until it comes out of their ears. So when you ask yourself, but what does a leader do? A leader does a few things, and in that order. Number one on that list is people. Because you can't lead yourself, can you? But also, it's about getting things done through others. Number two is about what type of culture are you going to create? Is it a fearful culture? Is it a culture that says, no, you are only supposed to be seen, never heard? Yeah. Is that culture? Have I succeeded in saying to everybody, look after this company like your very own? The third, which is the most important, it's about reputation management. Because the reputation of the organization is much more than its balance sheet. If you get it wrong, the share price dips by 1%. Sometimes that could be 300 billion. Then it's about stakeholder management. And a stakeholder is defined as anybody that is likely to have an impact on the organization. If you lay that foundation, the money comes. The more you have succeeded on the foundation, the money has never failed to come. Similarly, with management of a crisis, what are the sequences? What are the steps? Funny enough, it always starts with the people. So whenever there's a crisis, listeriosis, 120 people have died, there's been floods, a mine has just collapsed. Number one, we say, remember the people involved. When you're the CEO, the first words to bellow out of your mouth is condolences to Vincent Chabalala's family, because they are now without a father, without an uncle, without a brother. That's where it starts. Secondly, it's about telling the truth. Thirdly, it's about telling the whole truth. Lastly, it's about telling it quickly. Because the truth has a funny way of outing, irrespective of what your lawyers have advised you. That's not leadership. Leadership is about saying, okay, you told me if I say, oh, of course, the source of the poisoning happened in that factory in Boksburg. But the lawyer says, if you admit that, there's going to be a class suit. So no, thank you for letting me know. But because leadership is about truthfulness. It's not only about truth speaking, it's about truth living. It's what you actually say, and you say it quickly. We suspect that's where it's the source, that's where it's coming from. We're still doing a piece of work, we'll come back to you. And then you commit on regular feedback. If you do those, the results come. So whether it's crisis management, whether it's about the sequence of just what the CEO does, isn't it amazing that it all starts and ends with the people? That it is the people that are the company. It is the people that are the business. That if you put people in the center of a country, that country thrives.
You know, as I was listening to you, there were so many thoughts going through my mind. And one of the things that I want to expand on is we're saying that the people is where what leadership is all about. It's about leading those. But imagine for a moment if every single person in our organization had a leader mentality. So leading and doing my job as a leader, leader's mentality. And why I want to expand on that, you know, in the work that we do, as I work with, whether it is C-suite or the various layers of an organization, the way people define leadership is really surprising to me. So when I go in to talk to organizations, and I would say, you know, we are the #1 leadership development company in the world, and immediately people think of the pyramid and they think, oh, okay, you're talking about leadership up here, executives, and in my head, I'm thinking, well, actually, there's treasure at the bottom of the pyramid. That's where treasure is. And when I'm talking about leadership, I'm talking about designing leadership mentality, self-leaders, leaders of organization, leaders of enterprises, from the lowest person. We're talking about a mindset. We're talking about how do I lead myself? How do I lead others? And that's what leadership is. You know, all the work that we do at Franklin Covey can be kind of boxed into 4 things, all of which you've mentioned, which is developing exceptional leaders at every level, instilling habits of effectiveness in every individual, building an inclusive, high-trust culture, and giving organizations a solid execution framework to help them execute on their must-win strategies. So all of those things, as you've articulated it, comes out of the principle-centered work that Franklin Covey does. And I know that in all of your roles that you've had across your lifespan of leading incredible organizations, you have come across Covey work. Talk to me a little bit about what is the value you have seen in, whether it's been the 7 habits or the speed of trust, and any of those things, as it has shaped your own leadership journey.
Or principle-centered leadership.
Yes.
The one thing that I've extracted as a learning, that is a golden thread across all of them, it's about come as you are. It's about authenticity. It's about saying it's only when you are at peace with yourself that you are then able to make peace and common cause with others. And I like the way you frame it. You say it's a leadership mindset. It's a mindset. But all of those say Imagine if you came into this organization with an abundance mindset rather than a scarcity mindset. Abundance says there's enough for all of us because tomorrow will still be here. A scarcity mindset said, let me eat all of it today because tomorrow it might not be here. And it is destructive to the environment, and it is destructive to the people that you are meant to be investing in over the long period of time. Because on a composite basis, you say tomorrow can be substantially better than today. And that's what leadership is about. Leadership is about lifting your gaze and say, today can take care of itself. It's tomorrow that we must worry about. It's 10 years that we must worry about. And for me, it's two parts. The first talks about you as an individual because it's personal. The other one is institutional because it's the system that succeeds and it's the system that fails. So at a personal level, it says, can you lend to a place where in self-conversation, in self-discovery, in self-mastery, you can start by saying, but why am I here? And you call that purpose. It must be bigger than myself. Secondly, it's about saying, but where am I going to play? Because I can't be everywhere. I need to be selective because I want to have impact. And today we talk about double materiality. Yes, financial impact, financial materiality. But imagine if we started measuring impact materiality. It's how you touch other human beings in a very meaningful way. The third, it's about saying, how do I play to win? It means your own definition of success. That there can't be for all of us if there's only enough for myself. So how do I win? I can only win when all of us feel that we are winning. It's the one that says, you started A, I started C, and very quickly, because we are lazy, we then say, oh, no, the compromise must be B, because it's neither A nor C. But the speed of trust says, is it possible that together we can accomplish that which on my own will take me inordinately long? Therefore, you were A, I was C. Can we strive for D, which is better than A, better than C? Then I go home and say, I've won. And you go home and say, I've won. Because I've got my A+, I've got my C+. And that's what a leadership mindset is about. It then says, now that I know how success looks like, what skills do I need? And then lastly, look where it ends. Who is going to help me? Because on my own, I'm unlikely to do it. It's at a personal level, because that's how you show up. But at an organizational level, it's the same mindset. It says, imagine if I started first by not expecting trust, but by extending trust as a foundation. And you spoke about the pyramid. If this trust is abundant everywhere, it's a strong foundation on which any pillar can stand. The second one says, I actually invite conflict, because conflict is healthy. Business schools have conflict management courses. No, it's ugly. When you see it, you must knock it off with a knobkir. But in healthy organizations, actually, it's about saying, how do you feel? It's about looking at Mary, who's normally quiet, and the best suggestions for organizations have come not from the usual suspects, from those that who have teased it out of them, to say, you've been awfully quiet. What do you think? And they say, I thought what I'm saying is actually quite stupid to myself, but I'm being asked to articulate it, and the organization is quiet and ready to listen and receptive. I think ABCD, and sometimes that's the salvation of the organization. Then we go back to our offices and we commit to action. Because until and unless we do, we haven't really moved, isn't it? Because it stays only in our head. That's why we said learning is an experience. You must experience it. Because otherwise it's just information. And if you don't use it, it's just data. Lastly, if that foundation, it's trust, it's about extending and inviting conflict. It's about committing to action. We need to finally hold each other and one another finally accountable. Somebody has to say, I'm going to do it. If it's to be, it's up to me. Because if I don't do it, I'm letting the team down. If those foundations are there, the results always come. That's the pinnacle of that triangle. It's not the stuff of only these guys. It's when all of them in the organization, including these and those, say, no, this is my company. I must defend it. At night when I'm going to my in-laws' house, let me just pass by the office to make sure that it's still there, that nobody didn't steal it in the middle of the night. Maybe, just maybe, you might see the thieves trying to test the strength of the perimeter gate, and you hoot and you shoo them away because it is just your company. You don't just see it last on Friday and maybe on Monday. And this you will never know from people. That's what it means. Why our obsession with leadership? Because we are not self, but we are the other-centered.
What you've articulated is how I'd love to hear other people that do the Kavi work articulate their lived experience of using these principles in their everyday leadership. I want to unpack all of that which you had shared, and I want to align it back to how it fits into the Kavi world, because you have it so ingrained in you that it's kind of who you are now. People that are listening to this leadership podcast perhaps for the first time might be wondering, Malini said that she's talking to Bonang around application of the Kavi work. Where's the synergy? Where's the alignment? So let me, for those listeners and those people that are watching this, let me unpack that in terms of what you have shared. Firstly, what we do is we live our life by design, not by default, because we want a very clear picture of what we want for self and for others. And when we're clear about that, so everything in life is designed twice. First mentally, then physically in action. And only once we've done that, that's habit 2, right? It's begin with the end in mind. And when you live a principle-centered, purpose-driven life, you have a very clear view of what is important and what is not. In the absence of your purpose, you will not be able to discern what's important and what's not in all the various roles that we play. You spoke so eloquently about that win-win mindset. You know, it was a challenge for me as well when I first did the 7 Habits, because being ambitious, a competitive spirit, I thought win-win? Like, who thinks win-win? Shouldn't it be win-lose? And I came to learn that win-win is an attitude. It is not an outcome. And when you walk into engagements, whether if I engage with my people, I engage with others, I engage with a competitor, I'm thinking, I'm walking in there with an attitude of win-win. And suddenly I see this pie as, how do I make this pie bigger, as opposed to, well, I better just eat this piece right now because tomorrow I'm not going to get a piece. Right, relating back to what you were talking about. And beyond that, though, when we think, you know, a lot of people think that, you know, compromise is a good place to land. And what you're sharing and what we learn from our work is that actually compromise is not a good place. Because compromise implies that 1 + 1 = 1.5, because for us to land at compromise, you give up and I give up. But there's a third alternative, where when we consider the values of what both of us can do together, as opposed to what I do on my own, it becomes 1 + 1 can be 3, 10. It could be infinitive. because we have that mindset of how do we do more together than I can do on my own. And in order for you to get that, as you've explained in your experience, when you have the spirit of trust and the 7 habits kind of side by side, you have these high trust behaviors that you put into practice every day. And Stephen Emar talks about those 4 cores of credibility. You spoke about it earlier, integrity, but not just integrity, congruency. Congruency is aligned to humility. Intent. What is my intent? That's, the character, who we are. Capabilities and results is my competence. And those things are then further activated, my frontline behavior. There are 13 high trust behaviors that makes me a credible leader or not. So you really spoke about it so eloquently. Have you seen that having those principles inside of relationships makes a difference to results? Talk to us a little bit about that.
So maybe let me just address 2, because I couldn't agree with you more. So the first is this mindset, and I'll come back to it. Yeah. The second one is, how does it look like in practice? So when you say win-win, wow, win-win, I said it's counterintuitive. So when you drive in your Land Cruiser Prado in the Namib Desert, and you screech to a halt because the traction is no longer there, the resistance of the sand has brought this vehicle to a halt, and you come out alone, and you push this, and you know that you don't have the physical strength on your own to take it out of this quagmire. And you sit in your car frustrated. You look at your cell phone and you've got no signal. And the good Lord answers your prayers. You see another one, the wind blowing and the dust bellowing, and somebody screeches to a halt next to you, and you start smiling. You say, there's my salvation. Because you understand this mindset. You get out of your vehicle and you say to this person, don't worry, there's no signal. You can't even call the Automobile Association. But guess what? Let me help you push your vehicle out of this quagmire. The 2 of you, all of a sudden, now have the physical strength to push this out successfully. And the guy looks at you and says, you must be an angel. Jumps in, starts the car, says, too quick. Now, could you come and help me to push mine? Oh, still idling, and helps you to push it out. On your own, you couldn't push yours. On her own, she couldn't put hers. But the 2 of you pushed both cars out of it. That's what win-win says. And if you accept that, there is nothing that together you can't accomplish. The last piece on mindset is the mindset that says, just because I'm right doesn't make you wrong. Because we grow up in this binary world. When somebody says, no, of course this is not black, the mind immediately says, then it must be white. But we forget there are 51 shades of gray in between. And it's that leadership mindset that says, because there's more than me in this business, imagine if I created space and I lived comfortably with the contradictions. I have the ability to hold 2 opposing ideas in my head and still be able to function. Therefore, I allow you to describe your truth. And there's your truth. And then I have an opportunity to describe my truth. Leadership is about saying, can I envision a world where these truths can sit side by side without my truth invalidating your truth? That's what leadership is about. That's what win-win is about. Because if I see Table Mountain from my vantage point, I can describe it. But if I ask you to describe Table Mountain from the opposite end and you describe it, I now have 2 views of Table Mountain still sitting where I am. And that's what leadership seeks to do. can I have double the experience with just one life? If there's 9 of us, can I have 10 times the experience just by knowing when to pause and listening and internalizing and then acting out? Because leadership is about stealing unashamedly all the good things. Because the only person that can claim absolute originality is Adam. All of us, we grow by watching and emulating. Your children don't care what you say. They just watch what you do.
Correct, correct. Said so beautifully. The only way to influence is to model. What you've described, once again, like I just said earlier, is you are such an embodiment of the work that we do that it comes out in your general conversation. I can't put it into, okay, you're now speaking habit 1. You're now it's part of who you are. A foundational element in the Kavi work is this idea of pause. Because inside, so when you pause, and you've said pause to decide how you're going to respond. When we pause, we're actually taking a moment to recognize that actually, right now, I am responding to a stimulus that I may respond inaccurately, incompletely to, because my amygdala is in control. And when I pause, it gives me a moment to come up to my prefrontal cortex, because it's in my prefrontal cortex that I can now, my executive functioning is there, my rationality is there, but in the Kavi work, we talk about the 4 human endowments. It doesn't matter what your social standing is, it doesn't matter what your financial standing is, we all have these 4 gifts. It's the gift of self-awareness, of conscience, of independent will, and creativity. That which you talk about in terms of when we pause, that pause is a moment for us as human beings to know, where do I go and how do I respond in the most appropriate way, recognizing that my view of Table Mountain is inaccurate, it's incomplete, because there are multiple views that I have to take into consideration. That whole thing is about, so part of the work that we're doing when we go in and speak to leaders and we're developing leadership skills is, how do you get that kind of mindset? The second thing you spoke about is pause and listen. Habit 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And in leadership, you will know that sequence matters in that space. Them first, then you. Because it's in that sequence that, as you said, unashamedly, as leaders, we want to know and learn what's going on. We want to get as much information. That's what those principle-centeredness around how we develop leadership does. You've said it so beautifully. What I'd like for you to share with our audiences, whether there are people watching us on YouTube or listening, just in their cars right now, is if you were to give the most solid advice to leaders of others right now, or leaders of self, what would be the 3 to 5 things that people must do in order for them to know that my time on earth was valuable? I didn't just be there and breathe air. I contributed. What will those things be?
So let's start first with the 7th habit, because you spoke about pause so beautifully, I was getting goosebumps. It says, sharpen the saw. It acknowledges that if you depend only on yourself, on your brawn, like a saw, You'll work hard, day in and day out. At some stage, you get tired. The saw gets blunt. And uses an analogy that says, at that moment, it is more useful to pause. As you pause, of course, you lose progress to sharpen the saw. When you come back, you are energized and emboldened. This saw will be like a warm knife cutting through butter. You are both effective and efficient. That's the stuff of leadership. But who sharpens the saw? Even the Bible says it is iron that sharpens another iron. So if you haven't developed other leaders, who is going to sharpen you? The onus is on you. The responsibility is at peace times. When you walk into the organization as the group CEO of the Bidvest Group Limited, you start thinking about, what if I don't wake up in the morning? What if I fall off the bus? What if after 4 years I get headhunted to be the CEO of Old Mutual? Who's going to take over from me? At that moment, you start developing your own successors. That's your job. You don't leave it to nature. And then, of course, you get a structure. Who's ready now? Who's ready in a year? Who's ready in 5 years? Not in and of itself. So that the one that will be ready in a year, you then say, but what are the gaps now? And you start investing and exposing them to that. If you do that successfully, the leadership will be seamless, because you don't want to be the only one that knows. That, to me, is how you take pause. That's how you sharpen the saw. But let's go back to, what then can we leave as some pearls of wisdom based on our limited few months of experience trying to fathom out what this thing called leadership is about. It ought to start with some sort of a compelling vision. Vision simply says, you start with the end in mind. Vision simply says, can I take my people to a place where they've never been and paint it so vividly that they see it in their mind's eye and they come to work every day understanding that I've got a purpose here, I'm doing something. And in leadership terms, it's about speaking beyond just the work that people are doing. The Harvard Business Review says at NASA, they've succeeded in, when you speak to the cleaner, when you say what you do, they are not saying, I'm making this place to be clean and to be spotless. It says, here I'm helping to put somebody to the moon. Can we say to our people, this is how your piece of work fits in with what we do, so that if you don't do it, then you'd have missed the mark. And if I haven't succeeded in communicating that, I've missed the point. It's about saying to people, you are building this house because you also have a legitimate expectation that at some stage you might inherit it. If you inherit it, it's possible that you would ensure that the foundation is firm, that the bricks and mortar are of the highest quality, because you might just inherit it as a possible leader. The second one is about saying you need courage, because people want to follow leaders that lead from the front. A good shepherd, when you start, you're using the whip so that the sheep know where you are and you're heading them. Over a period of time, you walk in front of them. They know your smell. They hear your voice. They know the songs you sing. They know that you are taking them to greener pastures, and they willingly follow you. Our people will jump over the cliff for us if they know that we trust them, if they know that we value their contribution, if we have succeeded in communicating that they've got a sense of belonging. The one that is less sexy to talk about, it's about integrity, wholesomeness, that your intentions are wholesome, that you're not thinking only about yourself, but you are thinking about the royal we. People must say, on my own, I'll be poorer without this company, because the company is my passport to provide for my children's education. And by so doing, I invest in my own pension fund. That connection must be clear and well articulated. So when we succeed in doing that, they will know that we do it because we do it in the best interest of the company, not me, myself, I. That's the definition of fiduciary responsibility, acting in the best interest of the entity, and not just in the best interest of the shareholders, nor in the best interest of employees. The entity must survive because the entity must outlive you and I. Yes, it's about catching your people doing the right thing and piloting and highlighting them. It's about recognizing them publicly and chastising them in public. It's about giving them space for them to realize their dreams, using the machinery, the force, the impetus of this big behemoth called the Bidvest Group Limited. Their own individual dreams are just as valid to them. That's why in the interview process, we ask them, what do you want out of life? Not what you want out of work, so that we help you to achieve that which you want out of life. It's when those are aligned, then we say we have achieved congruence. That's why we give long-term incentives, not just to the executives, but to the entire company. That's why we talk about you need to have your shirt also on this business, so that you feel like an owner, you act like an owner, you protect like an owner. Lastly, it's about saying, when all is said and done, remember the heart of everything that we do, there are people. They've got feelings. Sometimes they're off, sometimes they're hot, sometimes they're sad, sometimes they're devastated. And let me just end by saying, because we spoke a little bit about spirituality, so James writing to the 12 tribes who are scattered about, of course, starts first by greetings. So in our culture, it's about saying sawubona. It's an isiZulu or Nguni word that says, I see you. Not just by eyes, I hear you, I feel you. There's a magic that happens in the last trimester of that fetus. It only hears the voices of the mother, the sound of the mother, the taste of the mother, the smell of the mother. That's why it becomes possible in the Ngorongoro crater, in the migration from Kenya to Tanzania and back, that these 1.5 million wildebeest each synchronize and drop 30,000 little wildebeest. And the lioness comes and they scatter around. When they come, it's not possible for a mother to suckle a wrong baby, a baby to drink from a wrong mother. Because just that trimester, that's when the completeness of life, like in the business, what you are building, then gets completed. Because those sounds, those smells, it's no accident that even the immune system of a little baby, for that first 6 months, it's a mirror image of the immune system of the mother. That's what makes us human. And then when they get exposed to smallpox and mumps, they develop their own immune system. But because we got it from our mothers. If you are a leader, you want to leave those smells. If you are a leader, you want to leave those voices so that they feel like this is home. This is my sanctuary. And if we succeed in doing that, then we have completed that cycle of life. Hence the migration from the triple P, which talks about, in that order, the planet, after the people, lastly the prophet. In that order. Then we talk about integrated reports, because we understand it's not just about finances, it's also about how we do things. And then we talk about now the sustainable development goals of 2060, that there ought to be equity, that there ought to be social justice, that there ought to be the liberation of all those that are in our organization. Now we talk about ESG as part of that environment. Social and society is important, and governance is important, because it's a system that describes how we engage, interact, and interface. You can see the continuum, the consistency. Each one builds upon the other, and it takes us to a higher form. Imagine when you can build an organization like a monument that lives for 3,000 years, because that's what we inherited from the Egyptians when they built the pyramids. And we want the Bidvest Group Limited to be the subject of our niece and nephews because they say our forebears completed their own struggles and battles. Now it's up to us to fathom our own wars.
Bonang, as you're speaking, I was really hoping that I'm going to bring our conversation to a close, and you've suddenly opened up a new thought. And I want to just go there first before bringing us to a close. There's two big things that I want us to explore a little bit. You speak about the migration of the wildebeest. You speak about nature and the way in which we can, we simply follow a sound and energy, that which we recognize. I want to take your mind to the debate around nature versus nurture, around leadership, and the value of a dichotomy in that, or a one versus the other. Where's your head? What is your view on that? And I have my own view, but I'd really like to hear where your head is around those two things.
I think the best leaders are the ones that are absolutely attuned to nature, because nature is a wonderful metaphor for business. Nature has its own cycles, its own timetables. Nature knows when to give you strawberries and fruits in summer, because you don't need the energy of pork. And when nature says it's now winter, you need much more sustaining food type, it gives you potatoes. And it shuts down the strawberries and the fruits and the vegetables so that they are not available, to force you to go out to the wilderness and go hunt for a gazelle, a springbok, and bring it home and eat something that is high in protein content. If we followed that cycle of nature, we'll do things in sequence. That's why our forebears knew when to fish, when to hunt, when to plant, when to harvest. They never overfished because they knew that I'll still be here. The lake needs to continue to providing for us. If they caught a fish that was too small, they tenderly unhooked it and took it back, because they knew not now, but in 3 years' time, it might be my only food source. They would know the months of the year when these fish are spawning and they are producing eggs, so that there's more fish. In those months, fishing was prohibited. It was all natural. That is leadership. We lead by those cycles. That's why most companies have 3-4 boards in a year, 1 a quarter. We follow that cycle. At what time do we put systems and processes that will lead to the approval of the strategy? At what point do we just pause and look at the performance of the organization because the audit has been completed, so that we can give feedback to the CEO how they're doing, and then we do salary increases, bonuses, which we call STIs and LTIs, because we're thinking about this company 10 years down the line. But we say nature, it's a wonderful metaphor for business, because it's only when you watch nature that you see that it's actually obsessed, not with itself, but with others. That's why rivers don't drink their own water, and trees don't eat their own fruit. The flowers don't give us this wonderful fragrance because they themselves want to smell like Fontainebleau in the middle of summer, not like Calcutta, where it could be 50 degrees on the shade. Nature says the more you do something, you get better at it. And in business, we call it mental muscle. And it says there is nothing much more powerful as an individual, as an exercise to the heart, than extending a hand and lifting another human being. Because that's the stuff of leadership. That one hand extended to lift another human being, it's much more useful than 2 hands clasped together in prayer. It's not useful when you go to your pastor and say, I didn't eat last night because we had nothing. And the pastor says to you, kneel down, my child, let's pray. It's more useful when the pastor says, oh, I've got leftover food in the fridge. I'm going to whip it out and let's see whether we can share it. That's the stuff of leadership. It also says, at an individual level, you really just want to make sure that you don't wait until you have the corner office. But it's a continuous principle that leadership is what we become in the process of succeeding, not once we have succeeded. Hence, lift as you rise, not lift only once you have risen. It says, as a company, doing good is good for all. That we need to continue to do well by doing good. The two are not mutually exclusive. Whether it's nurture or nature, actually doesn't matter, because it all started with nature. There will be no egg that gives rise to a chicken if the chicken was not created first, so that you have the egg. That's why leaders that are not attuned would eat all the eggs, including the seed that they need for tomorrow's planting and next year's harvest. Only the fools will say, no, this chicken is too slow in giving me the golden eggs. I'm going to go back into the chicken and get these eggs for tomorrow. Because then that's where the expression, killing the golden goose that lays the golden eggs. It is the goose that is golden. Hence the eggs are golden. So therefore for me, I think nature teaches us so much. In African culture, the first month of the year is September. Because they looked at nature and said, that's when life starts, begins, blossoms. The flowers come up and the trees bloom. That is the first month. And if we follow that cycle, we know that at some stage it will go and then harvest so that we start again. So when they've got 10 millis, leadership is about maybe we'll eat 8. Because the 2 we need a seed for tomorrow. That's why we talk about seeding the next level of leadership. Because you don't want to use all of it for the here and now.
Beautiful analogies, really, really beautiful. And when I think about that and how do we apply it, and as we think about how do we develop that next level, how do we bring more leaders in, it's recognizing that there's a balance, right? There's almost an innate nature of who we are, and then there's this nurture piece. How do I develop those skills? What are the skills that are needed in order for me to make more of, so that we can actually build this organization so that it's ready for my nieces and my nephews and the whole of Africa to know that my forefathers were part of that building block. They all contributed, but it is a recognition that it's almost a near perfect balance of nature and nurture for us to have these really great contributors whom people can say under their leadership, I feel like a valued member of a winning team doing meaningful work in an environment of trust. That's what great leadership is about. It's about people being able to say that with their hand on their heart. I feel like I am a member of a winning team doing meaningful work in an environment of trust. The last thing that I want to get your take on, which is perhaps a big gap, is very many organizations, and you have been in this space for very many years, the job is to execute on must-win strategies. You don't just put a building up, you don't just craft a strategy and you put it on a wall. It's because you need to execute against it. People need to do something in order to hit those numbers, because we are in business for business. We started our conversation off saying we don't just get into business because we're a nice guy. You're in business because you want to be in business and you want to make some money. The reality, though, is that there is a very big gap with strategy and execution. In fact, research says that 70% of all strategies fail. Why would you say that happens in organization? Is it a leadership thing or not? And if so, talk to me around that.
And it's only 13% of leaders who develop good strategies and then implement them. 13. The rest often develop amazing strategies and they go to file 13 and they falter on execution. So General George Patton says, great wars are won by good execution, not good planning. Because good execution will save even a mediocre strategy. So it's about doing. It's in the doing that we learn more, we fine-tune and tweak. And yet most of the organizations fail in the execution. Let's go back to our nature example as I close with just 3 analogies. So the first analogy says, if we're thinking about tomorrow, it's about our actions today that determine what that tomorrow is going to be like. That's why countries that make English compulsory but agriculture optional will always produce citizens that speak fluent English on an empty stomach. That, to me, is the stuff of leadership. Say, agriculture is not about today. It's about tomorrow. It's not just about food security. It's about the survival of the clan and of the tribe. The second one, Harriet Tubman is a slave abolitionist. She says, I've freed 1,000 slaves. But I could have freed 1,000 more if they knew that they were slaves. A lot of our people don't even know the potential they have. They're busy scratching about like chickens, not knowing that they've got the power of an eagle. They can soar to greater heights just because they're surrounded by chicken. Do we know who we are? Do we know what we're capable of? Do we know how we can unleash the might, the force, the impact, the potential of these organizations that we leave towards the betterment of humanity? The last one is Whitley Phipps. At the time that we thought it wasn't going to happen, stands up and reminds us that it was the rule of law, that the slaves were not allowed to play the white keys on the piano, that all the Negro spirituals were composed using only the black keys. Stands up to sing this amazing John Newton classic, The Amazing Grace, composed with only 5 black keys. We have much more than 5 black keys. We've got systems and processes. We've got principle-centered leadership. We've got the 7 habits of highly effective people. We've got leading with trust. With all this within our disposal, imagine what together we can do to create a better world so that our children do not disown us, because we are sons and daughters of amazing warriors that achieved so much, not with little, but sometimes with nothing. If we imagine the first person to reach the highest icy peak in the world, they didn't even have the attire and thermal underwear that we have today, and all the instruments that we use, and the 10 shepherds that carry our bags. All they had was just themselves. And in life, I think we are called upon to blade forward, to leave this world in a state that is substantially better than we found it in. Because the Stone Age didn't end because man ran out of stone. It ended because man found a much more effective and efficient way to do stuff. This earth, there's only one of it. There's no spare one. So it behooves us to leave it in a state that is substantially better than we found it in. because we didn't so much inherit it from our forebears as we borrowed it from our children.
Bonang, I would be able to sit here and speak to you all day because they are just such amazing pearls of wisdom that you keep dropping. And every time you say something, there's something that clicks in my mind. I mean, this idea of I could have freed 1,000 more if everyone knew that they had the potential to free another. And therein lies the gold, the nugget, that if we can unleash the latent potential that lies inside each one, each person that stands in front of us in our organization, imagine the kind of organizations we have. If we think about what results are and this is to every single leader out there, leader of a team, leader of an organization, you think about what results do you currently have, your X. Now think about the number of people in your organization and you unleash that latent talent by giving them some critical skills that you learned as you engage with Franklin Covey. What could that number look like? Could it be that you can free 1,000 more slaves? Had they known, it's so profound what you've said. It's the first time I've heard it. I could have freed 1,000 more had they known that they had the capability of doing that. And it is about communicating people's worth and potential so clearly that they are inspired to see it in themselves. I cannot thank you enough, Bonang, for this time. I hope you had fun.
I had the most amazing fun. I learned, as I always do. But what we speak about is the stuff of human greatness, because human greatness is not measured in money and power, but in old-fashioned goodness and character. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And that's a wrap. And look forward to the next episode of The Leadership Pulse with me, Malini Ramsamy.